Today, we are going to be re-ranking the 2022 draft class. We're going to be going through the first two rounds, so the top 24 rookies from 2024, talking about how we would be drafting these guys now after we have seen what they've done through their rookie season. I'm going to go ahead and start it off here, and I don't think that I have to defend this take too aggressively here. I am drafting Breece Hall with the 101. He's currently the RB1 on most Dynasty rankings that you're going to be able to find, maybe up there with Bijan Robinson, who is probably going to surpass him, but that's just unbelievable. This guy came off of an ACL tear and is still maintaining his status as one of the best Dynasty running backs to have. Now, I know it's a dangerous game removing games from a sample size, but Hall was a part-time player for the first 3 weeks, and then he tore his ACL early in his final game of the season. So really, we've got this like 3-game sample size of Breece Hall as a full-time player, and he averaged 21.2 PPR points per game during that stretch. Only Austin Eckler averaged more over a full season. He had the 10th highest target share among running backs. He finished the season with 4 straight games with a score and back-to-back games with over 100 scrimmage yards. His 9 rushes of 15-plus yards ranked 22nd among all running backs, and he did it in 6.5 games. I mean, just unbelievable what this guy was doing in a small sample. Obviously, the ACL is a concern here, but for most of the doctors that I've talked with and listened to, they expect him to be back to 100% in the 2023 season. It was a clean ACL tear, no additional damage, and plus, he's just 21 years old, and he's a freak athlete, so those are both strong indicators that he should return to form. Like I said, I don't think I have to agree with this or defend this one too aggressively. Matt, Alfredo, are you pushing back on Breece Hall as a 101 at all?
Nah, not for me, man. I think it's the right call. I mean, I love all these receivers, which obviously I'll talk about here in a second. But look, I think Breece Hall showed so much in that first chapter of his rookie season. Unfortunately, the ACL tear. But yeah, no, I think it's a pretty defensible decision for sure.
Well, that leaves us with you, Matt, sitting at 102, and hopefully you'll talk about one of the wide receivers from this 2022 class. Who are you taking there?
Yeah, 100% talking about a receiver here. And look, honestly, this was the first of many times during this draft where I was a little tilted, right? Like because there's a lot of good players, like I said, at wide receiver in this class. I think that when you look at these top 3 guys, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Drake London, I actually don't think you can go wrong here. Like, I think if you guys wanted to go London here, I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think that most people view Olave and Wilson as kind of above London right now. I think that's a little misguided. I think he is just as good as those dudes, and I think he has as high of a ceiling as them throughout the course of his career. Like, there is a tier of those 3 guys here, and it was tough to decide, but I did eventually go with Garrett Wilson, which I think is probably the consensus opinion. But again, really hard to make the call here between these 3 players. But the thing that does it for me is that I think Wilson, who I actually probably would have ranked 3rd in this group coming into the draft, the thing that does it for me is that his rookie season was so impressive and I think showed true superstar ability. I'll share one note from his reception perception profile from his rookie year. Garrett Wilson had an 81.2% success rate versus press coverage in his rookie season in reception perception. The following rookie receivers have hit 80% in their rookie seasons: CeeDee Lamb, Michael Thomas, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Odell Beckham, and now Garrett Wilson. Not a bad list to be on here for Garrett Wilson, who obviously we expect to have a quarterback upgrade at any point now, whenever Rodgers and the Jets and the Packers want to get this thing done.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if you can really downgrade from what he had to play with last year. So even if for whatever reason Rodgers retires or that deal falls through, I mean, they could pick up just about anybody off the street and have a better QB room than they did last year. So yeah, I mean, I would have gone with Garrett Wilson at the 102 as well. Much like Breece Hall, it's really hard to push back against that one. And talk about the Jets, man. What a draft they had last year, being able to bring in Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. Just that's a lot of fun for those guys in New York. Alfredo, over to you. Who are you taking at 103?
Yeah, well, first of all, as a Dolphins fan, like, it just breaks my heart to see that the Jets have 2 really good young players. It's so incredibly annoying. But at pick 3 here, I took Chris Olave, wide receiver for the Saints. And like Matt was saying, I think that between Wilson, Olave, London, I don't think there's really that much of a separation in tier. I think you can't go wrong with any of them. But Olave is the guy that, at least for now, seems to have some of the best prospects moving forward and long-term. Maybe not immediate in this season, but long-term. He started off really hot last year. He's a wide receiver 13 in points per game after the first 7 weeks. And we talk about how much Garrett Wilson struggled or had to deal with quarterback struggles. It's not like Chris Olave was out there with Pro Bowlers, it was Jameis Winston and then Andy Dalton, and then we had the Taysom Hill experiment again, and like things just weren't great for him. But you look back at what he was doing well, and Olave was 15th in target share in the league, 3rd in air yard share, so he was just not only getting targeted, but getting targeted deep for big plays. And that works with now the quarterback who's going to be there in New Orleans, Derek Carr. He takes shots downfield. Last year was 2nd in the league in average depth of target. And something I talked about on my show a couple weeks ago with you, Dave, is Garrett, in terms of Olave versus Garrett Wilson, Olave had more yards per target, yards per reception, yards per route run, and that yards per route run is 5th amongst rookie wide receivers since 2011, only behind OBJ, AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. A lot of the same superstars that Matt's listing over there for Garrett Wilson, and that seems to be kind of the litmus test for these rookie wide receivers. And I think so much is just it's very open right now for Olave to just get the target share. Michael Thomas still isn't 100% after his toe surgery. He's out here tweeting cryptic things again. Like, can we get one off season where Michael Thomas doesn't do this? There's so much that we don't know surrounding the Saints, but we do know that their offense is going to be predicated around Chris Olave for the foreseeable future. And I don't think it's that crazy to think of him as maybe even the best long-term fantasy asset in this class at the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, when you talk about longevity of wide receivers, you can certainly make an argument for it. He looked great as a rookie, and so did the guy I'm taking at 104. And Matt, you kind of talked about it already. All 3 of these guys you can tier very similarly. As we're going down the list from Garrett Wilson to Chris Olave to my guy Drake London, I mean, it seems like the quarterback play in the situation is what got worse with every single one of these players. But Drake London, you want to see guys clear certain metrics as rookies, and Drake London cleared across the board. The problem was that he was taking a huge slice out of a teeny tiny little pie. He had a 29.4% target share, which was not only best among all rookie wide receivers, but was 5th among all wide receivers in the NFL. He was 2nd among all receivers in targets per route run. So this guy was a target machine when he was on the field. He was 11th in yards per route run, 14th in fantasy points per route run. And cushion is a tricky metric, and that's what we pulled from over at Player Profiler. I'd like to see what Matt has to add about this, but he ranked 8th in cushion among wide receivers, showing that he was able to get open and able to draw targets. The problem was that the Falcons ran the 7th fewest plays in the NFL, and they had the 2nd fewest pass attempts in the NFL. Catchable target rate for Drake London last year was outside of the top 30, and he was 57th in routes run. This is a run-first team that had terrible quarterback play, so even though Drake London was getting open and was drawing targets, the production just wasn't really there. As we always say in Dynasty, you want to bet on the talent because situations are much more likely to change than talent is. So I am betting on Drake London's talent. Matt, I don't want to put you on the spot right now. I don't know if you've got it available, but Drake London, does that cushion metric, him being 8th there, does that kind of align with what you were seeing looking at his reception perception profile?
Yeah, 100%. I wrote this in the in-season rookie report for Drake London that, it feels like a long time ago, but it was not that long ago that there was real, can Drake London get separation? Does he get open questions in college? I think I said the haters and losers that said that are definitely going to hate watching his rookie season for sure, because, this guy, from literally the word go, that first game against the New Orleans Saints, he was just cutting up that secondary that plays a lot of tight physical man coverage. It was just apparent from day one that he was a legitimate separator. Hey, let me tell you what. If he played with Caleb Williams this year at USC, we're not having these same discussions about can he get open, right? Because he's not going to be thrown into a bunch of contested situations. Alfredo knows what I'm talking about there, having watching the USC quarterbacks from last season, or the couple seasons ago. So, yeah, Drake London absolutely can get open. I think he is. I think he's a stud. I think he is going to be as good as Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave long term. A lot of potential there. We're just kind of counting on this aggressive Falcons evaluation of Desmond Ridder to be correct, which maybe it is, maybe it's not. I guess we'll have to see. But yeah, I really like Drake London, the player.
Please, Lamar Jackson, please, just let it happen. Let
it would be so
in
perfect.
Atlanta. We want it so bad. Alfredo and I, we've done about 8 shows together this offseason, and I think we have daydreamt about Lamar Jackson in Atlanta during every single one of them.
Yeah, we'll see.
Well, anyway, Matt, on to you with the 105. Now that we've gotten Breece Hall out of the way and the big 3 receivers, where are you looking at 105?
Yeah, this one's tough because there's a couple receivers I think you could justify here at 5, but I went to the running back position, and I went with Kenneth Walker because I think that there is a clear big 3 at the receiver position. And again, I felt that way coming into the draft. I think that Jameson Williams is a good player, but I think he is the start of the next tier, not necessarily as good as those three dudes. And I also think that there's a pretty clear teardrop from Breece Hall and to Kenneth Walker to the next running backs available. So I ended up going with Kenneth Walker here, who I think in his rookie season showed a lot of potential to be a explosive player. There was definitely some moments where I think he might have played through injury, or I also think that his style of running back is a little bit more boom bust. Maybe that was just a rookie year thing, but either way, the high end potential to rip off big runs in an offensive ecosystem that should be pretty stable from what we saw last year to this year, depending on where Geno is going forward. I think that's a pretty good spot for Kenneth Walker to be in. Love the offense with the two receivers there. So give me Kenneth Walker here at the 5th pick.
Yeah, I mean, we know he's got the love and adoration of Pete Carroll, and that goes a long way in fantasy football. So I'm with you. There hasn't been anything too surprising so far, I think, through these first 5 picks. This is kind of where they were getting drafted last year, and then they all cleared as rookies. Alfredo, you're going to shake things up a little bit with the 106?
I mean, you tell me. I'm going with Jameson Williams here, wide receiver for the Detroit Lions, and he was a guy that, Dave, you joked last week that I really need to get on this Jameson Williams kid, but I've really liked him all throughout the scouting process. And there's sometimes there's just dudes that you watch on film, and within a few seconds you just go, wow. And it's whenever that happens, you almost you got to highlight their name or put a star next to their name and be like, I got to come back to this guy and watch him multiple times. It's what gave me that reaction? And I think for a lot of people, you go back and you look at a lot of those draft experts, the pundits that you see on TV, he was the top wide receiver in the class until he tore his ACL in the national championship game. And I think more stuff started to come out as people were watching film, and people will still say he transferred from Ohio State to Alabama. Yeah, they had Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, but it was Alabama. It's not like he went to West Georgia Presbyterian Community College. He went to the SEC and he crushed it. I'd always love this really fun stat is he had the most 20-plus yard receiving touchdowns of any receiver over a 2-year span in the SEC from 2020 to 2021. And he only played in the SEC in 2021. He Mario Kart superstar lapped all the competition in the best conference in college football. And at least for now, he's a big winner after free agency. The Lions still did not add a top, free agent wide receiver nor a tight end. I'm sure they might add there in the draft, but there seems to be a really clear path to production on a passing offense that ranked 7th in the NFL. Team obviously values him pretty highly. They traded up for him. They took their time with his healing process. They didn't rush him back out there. And then we got a really small taste. Dave, I still love the tweet that you put out not too long ago. I think I've repeated it 5 times this offseason, is that Jameson Williams touched the ball 3 times. A 41-yard touchdown reception, a 40-yard rushing play, and a 66-yard touchdown reception called back on a holding penalty. And that's all we got to see from him. So yeah, we got a taste. I want more. I'm excited to see what he and offensive coordinator Ben Johnson do this season with the Lions.
And you know what wasn't in that tweet out of that sample size was him blowing the top off the defense, being wide open in an end zone, getting underthrown 10 yards by Jared Goff. I mean, this guy, you can't watch what he did as a rookie and not understand how he's going to translate into the NFL. He is a superstar in the making, so love that pick. Now I'm back on the clock at 107, and I got to admit, I was tilting here. There were a lot of different ways that I could have gone, and Treylon Burks is a guy that is admittedly pretty tough to draw a data-forward case for, but if you watch him, it's really hard not to get excited about what you saw his rookie season. One of the wildest things for me, though, is I looked on Keep Trade Cut at his volatility. After the NFL draft, he was the wide receiver 14 in Dynasty. By the time week 1 kicked off, he had slipped to wide receiver 34. Remember Asthma-gate and work ethic concerns and all that? This kid dropped from wide receiver 14 to wide receiver 34 without ever even taking an NFL snap. By December, he was wide receiver 18, kind of where he should have been. And now the season's over, and he has slid to wide receiver 24 again. I don't understand what's going on. This guy isn't doing anything at all and is still jumping up and down in all these trade value sites. He was injured almost his entire rookie year, and in between those injuries, we saw these little flashes of potential. Contested catches deep downfield, yards after the catch, insane strong hands in the red zone, tiptoeing down the sideline. I mean, we've seen him do a lot of spectacular things that a lot of NFL players aren't able to do. So really what it comes down to, I was a believer in the talent before the draft. I was a believer in the talent during last season. And now if I can use this as an opportunity to get him at 107 when he was going 103, 104 last year, I think that you've got to do it because there was nothing that he did to raise any concerns or red flags throughout his rookie season. Admittedly, it is tough to defend this pick, but he just pops off the screen when he's got the ball in his hands. And I think that he is still worth it at this point in a draft. Matt, You're on the pick with 108, and if you can tell me that I did the right thing in drafting Treylon Burks there, I'd like to hear that as well.
Yeah, look, I thought he was kind of overrated when he was around that like third pick last year. I liked all of these guys that we have already taken off the board at wide receiver over Treylon Burks last year. So I think actually getting him here at 107 is totally fine. I think the volatility comes from the fact that he was kind of a polarizing prospect. I think people that really watched him and dug into like the actual technical part of the game saw that he had a long way to go. I always thought he would kind of fit as like more of a big slot type of receiver, but the Titans I think probably took more of a long-term view of it last year, and they really tried to get him out there as an X receiver right away and let him kind of take his lumps there. So there are definitely parts of his rookie season where it doesn't look so good, and there are parts of his rookie season where it looks pretty good. So again, I don't think he has the same ceiling as these other top 3 receivers, but I'm not totally out on him either. So I think like 107 right here in the middle is perfectly fine, Dave. I think, I think that's the right thing to do. I would have weighed him against these next 2 receivers, and I weighed these next 2 receivers in Jahan Dotson and Christian Watson really hard against each other. And as soon as I submitted the pick of Christian Watson, I hate it. I regretted it immediately. I was like, oh man, Jahan Dotson's such a good player. He's tough. He's awesome. I'm not trying to steal notes here from anybody else, but he's such a good contested catch player. I really like him, but I do kind of think he is a good long-term number 2 receiver. And while Christian Watson is a little bit more volatile, I also think he kind of has a good floor because most of what he was in his rookie season in the prospect comparison that I gave him was like a Martavis Bryant type of player. And I think that's mostly what he was as a rookie, kind of a flash guy, still not consistent across the full route tree, but man, he could give you a deep over. He could give you go routes. He can give you, yards after the catch on crossing routes and slants and stuff like that. And I think you saw a lot of that his rookie year. So if he's just that guy going forward, I actually think he gives you like a decent floor from a fantasy perspective, but I do think there is some more development that can take place. And in that case, that's kind of why I ended up breaking ties in favor of Christian Watson. Although, like I said, I regretted not taking Jahan Dotson immediately, but then I said and then I felt fine about it, and then I regretted it, and I went back and forth a lot. So that ended up with Christian Watson, though.
And I kind of feel that same way about all 3 of these guys, Jahan Dotson, Christian Watson, and Treylon Burks. You kind of cluster them all together, and it's really tough to make a pick between them. I think the one thing, though, and this just blows my mind, is we haven't heard anything about the Packers looking to bring in wide receivers this year. And when you look beyond Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Samori Toure, Bo Melton. I mean, they have nobody else in that wide receiver room. So you figure Christian Watson's going to be a featured piece this year. Alfredo, let's hear about who you took at 108, though, now that we have both talked about him.
Dave, you say that like the Packers don't have any news about adding a wide receiver. Like that's something new. Like that hasn't been the case for like 5 straight years. So yeah, I mean, we've talked about him plenty. Jahan Dotson is the guy I took here. I was happy to take him. I was between Watson or Dotson, and Harmon made the decision for me. So the cool thing about Dotson is just like, yeah, he may not be the biggest or the fastest, but one thing that I think is just so important with a wide receiver, or 2 things, is obviously it's going to be first is route running, and then it's your hands, and he is exemplary in both of those. And I think he had the best hands in that entire draft class from last season. And like I'm looking at this year, and I see a player like Josh Downs, the guy that both Matt and I were watching film on, and they're very similar to me as prospects. They're both good contested catch guys, little shifty, probably middle of the field, except Dotson did a little more outside, and that's where he really won his matchups with Washington this last season. And as a rookie, he basically kind of had his season split in half. He had first 4 games and then his last 5 games that were all good. And so during those 9 games, he averaged 14 PPR points per game, and he was a solid starter. But he had that hamstring injury. The thing that stood out to me, which is, it sucks because this is so hard to replicate from season to season, it's the touchdowns. And his 20% touchdown rate was just insane. 7 touchdowns on 35 catches. And the interesting thing, though, is when you dive deeper into that, is that there's no wide receiver with at least 50 targets had a better touchdown rate than Dotson last season. And the other thing here is, what that tells me is like you kind of have to read between the lines here. This is a rookie that had a really bad quarterback situation and a bad passing attack and just a bad offense overall, and he was still able to score. What that tells me is that this offense trusts him. This offense is drawing up plays for him. So if the quarterback play gets even just a little bit better or somewhat the same, you can still expect production from Jahan Dotson. I am worried a little bit about the quarterback situation. I don't think the team sticks with Sam Howell. I can't imagine them doing that, knowing this is a make or break year for the staff. And Ron Rivera's like, all right, cool. Let's just throw him out there and see what happens. Like something's got to give there. But either way, Dave, like you mentioned it before, don't worry too much about situation. Bet on talent. Jahan Dotson, he's got the talent.
I mean, am I crazy in thinking that it's going to be Jacoby Brissett? I just assumed that he was going to be starting over
If it
Sam
is, that's
Howell.
great.
I mean, I think that's probably the best case scenario for Dotson. Now, I know like the faux pas you're never supposed to do is talk about your fantasy leagues or your fantasy startups, but I'm in a dynasty startup right now with the Football Guys staff. It is a 14-team startup.
Nobody cares, Dave. Nobody cares.
I know nobody cares, but Christian Watson, Jameson Williams, all these guys that we've talked about win in the 5th round. Somehow, Jahan Dotson slid all the way to 702, and in the middle of the 6th round, I was trying desperately to trade up. I can't understand why this guy is being slept on, and I mean, I get it. He was injured as a rookie, but in the little glimpses we saw, I mean, he looks like he's got all the makings to be a great wide receiver. So, Alfredo, I'm tipping my hat to you. I think that was the steal of the draft so far. And it seems like after that draft pick, after Jahan Dotson, once you get through those first 9, then it seems like there's a pretty big tier fall off. And then I could have gone just about anywhere here. And my pick at 110 may have been a little bit of a reach, but I really, really like Wan'Dale Robinson. And I know that there's some concerns about his size, but right now you're getting a discount because of the ACL tear. I don't think that he's going to be ready or effective for 2023, but when he was on the field, much like the other guys that I've drafted so far, he was a target magnet. 27.7% target share. Wasn't enough. He didn't have enough volume to qualify, but that would have been the 2nd best among all rookies. Targets per route run, he was in the same tier as Rachaad Bateman, Deontay Johnson, DK Metcalf, Devonta Smith. The problem is we just saw it on a very, very small sample size. Part-time player, but he looked like an elite target earner in between those injuries. Now, the big fear, I think, this offseason was that the Giants were going to go out and add some big names. But really, despite the plethora of additions that they made in free agency, Darren Waller is really the only player that's going to challenge Wan'Dale Robinson for that number 1 spot in the pecking order. We've still got the draft here, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if they use that, 20 or 22nd? If they use that pick on a wide receiver, it wouldn't shock me all that much. But right now, at this point in the draft, I think that you're looking for upside, and I think that Wan'Dale Robinson only what we saw last year was on a very small sample size, but I think that he still has that elite upside, and the Giants seem very, very content to manufacture touches to get him the ball. So, Matt, back over to you now with 111, and like I said, Pickens get a little bit slim this time of the draft, but I think that you got a good one here. Who did you take at 111?
Oh, wow. Great work. Great work on the pun there, Dave. Great work.
Thank you.
By the way,
I stayed up all night writing that one.
This seems like a good time for a bathroom break.
Yeah, right. Now let's throw it to our sponsors here. Actually, I do want to say, too, by the way, on Wan'Dale Robinson, it's pretty funny. The guy, it's like the all-slot offense over there in New York right now. And the guy I compared him to in my in the in-season rookie report, I'm like, yeah, a lot of his, like, kind of, we know the slot stuff, the gadgety stuff, whatever, but some of his like downfield stuff is a little reminiscent of early career Jameson Crowder, and then they actually signed current Jameson Crowder, which is pretty funny. So I'm interested to see what the Giants offense looks like this year. But another offense that I actually hate watching, but I will take a player from it here, is the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, and I'll take George Pickens at 1.11 again. Went very much back and forth between this player and the player that Alfredo is going to take next year at the 12th overall pick, but went with the receiver position. And look, I'm not like there are some big time like George Pickens honks out there. I'm not necessarily one of those guys, but I think he shows a lot of potential. I think there are definitely some separation questions, some route running questions that he can answer after his rookie year, but we know what the flashes look like and like the elite ability, literally elite ability at the catch point. Like he is one of the most dominant 50-50 ball, contested catch players. He tracks it really well. He has great body control, really special stuff there. I think there's a couple of different paths that George Pickens can go down here. But even if I'm going to be conservative, and I think like I think it's actually worth being a little bit more conservative and a little more, kind of level-headed in your George Pickens projections right now. I still think he can be on the high end of like the Devontae Parker axis of wide receivers. And I know that Devontae Parker ain't like a stud or anything like that, but he's a player that's lasted a long time in the NFL and has played that X receiver position. I think Pickens can be that guy, even in a conservative projection, so I feel pretty good at 111 taking him there.
Yeah, and I like that pick too. And I feel like we see this all the time. Like he had so many splashy plays that got people excited that immediately people came in and they said, whoa, 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 pump the brakes. Here's why George Pickens actually sucks. So then what happens is everybody over.
What a life. Imagine being like, I mean, like it's definitely worth pointing out like highlight bias is a real thing.
Right.
And like, because there were other people being like, well, this guy's already one of the best young receivers in the NFL. I'm like, no, he's not. He's like probably the 6th best guy in his own draft class. But also, like, imagine being like, wow, this guy looks really good. Here's actually 5 reasons why he sucks. Like, go outside. Get a life.
But that's the thing, and you see it. I mean, we all see it in the industry. And the truth is, he's not the best player in the draft. And the truth is that he doesn't suck. The truth is somewhere in the middle. And I think that getting him here, at the end of the first round, 11th overall, that probably is lower than he should be going. But I feel like the bias that we've heard ever since the season has ended is that, his yards per route run and targets per route run, and people just finding reasons to push him down. But at the end of the day, like you said, he is arguably one of the best 50-50 catch players in the NFL. And that's got to be worth something. So I like that pick here. The upside is immense for George Pickens. Alfredo, close us out with the end of the first round. Who are you taking at 112?
Yeah, I think we get to this point where we're kind of wishy-washy on all these guys. Like, it's hard to defend them a lot, but that's why we're taking them this late in this redraft. And I went with Dameon Pierce, running back for Houston. This was a guy that was skyrocketing up draft boards, and like every dude in a redraft league that showed up with a magazine of like who to draft was all in on Dameon Pierce and getting him in the 1st and 2nd round and just going absolutely bananas for him. And then they looked really smart at the beginning of the season when he was awesome. Weeks 1 through 10, he was 5th in rushing yards. He was a fantasy running back 12 in points per game. He was looking really good. And then he had these 2 back-to-back dud games, and then everyone who hated Dameon Pierce came out the woodworks and was like, see, I told you, drafting a running back is stupid. And it's just, yeah, he played against Washington and Miami, who had some really good defenses, and then things just started to fall apart for Houston in general, and then Dameon Pierce had an injury, and he missed the final 4 weeks, but you start to just unpack what he did. First of all, just going in there and being able to play the way he did after not having a whole lot on his resume in college at Florida, which is also just crazy. Like, just to take a moment to think about how poorly that the coaching staff at the University of Florida was utilizing these players in terms of Anthony Richardson and Dameon Pierce and all these guys. That's a whole nother show. But you look at what Pierce was able to do with Houston. He was at a 63% snap share as a rookie on a really bad team. I know they've added Devin Singletary there, and so I understand that 63% snap share goes down, and that's what you want for running backs is volume, but I think the volume one is going to be very different. I think Singletary takes on more of that Rex Burkhead role that we saw last year, and then some Dare Ogunbowale that came in as well, and it's going to be different. Okay, different doesn't mean necessarily worse. I think that this Houston Texans offense could be better, especially with a good young quarterback like a Bryce Young, likely more scoring opportunities that are going to be there. And DeMeco Ryans, it seems like they really want to establish a run. And if that's really what they want to keep doing and make their young rookie quarterback, comfortable, I can see them continuing to feed Dameon Pierce. And while he might not be this crazy top 12 or top 15 running back that some people thought he could be, I think he's still very much a solid RB2 right now in fantasy football.
Yeah, can't push back there. And that's what you're drafting him. You're not drafting him to be your set and forget RB1, but I think that he's going to be an RB2 for years to come. So like that pick, Alfredo. Today, we are drafting the 2022 rookie class all over again, and we are starting with round 2 here. And I know this is going to seem like a prisoner of the moment pick, but Alfredo, you and I did a similar show about a month ago, and I made this flag plant then, and I am even more certain about it now. I am taking Brock Purdy as the first quarterback off the board.
You're disgusting.
I don't even feel good about it, but let me back it up. Give me a second here, Alfredo. His worst fantasy outing last year was better and higher scoring from a fantasy perspective than Kenny Pickett's best fantasy outing. I mean, that's just what we're looking at here. We know that when guys play in the Shanahan system, it gives them immense ceilings, and he is going to be tied to Shanahan for the next few years. And now we have all of these indications that he might actually be the starter when healthy. I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent here, but just unbelievable that we're hearing this in March that they expect him to be the starter when healthy. But even if Lance regains the job, which I think is still very very much so a possibility. Purdy is essentially a handcuff quarterback that is going to have QB1 upside whenever he can play. So Lance has been hurt both years that he's been in the NFL now, and if he goes down, Purdy is a set and forget QB1 in your fantasy lineups. Now, these reports out of San Francisco could be a smokescreen. It could be some way that they're using to motivate Trey Lance. It could be an attempt to try to boost Brock Purdy's trade value, but either way, it's pretty tough to ignore what he did down the stretch last year. So it might seem crazy taking Mr. Irrelevant as the QB1 from this class. I just think that Pickett is kind of the safe and boring pick, and Purdy is the splashy ceiling pick. Before we get on to the next pick, I can sit back and let you guys both rip me apart for this one, because I know it's kind of wild taking Purdy as the first quarterback off the board.
Okay, it's not that wild. I just like to make fun of you. It's not that, because you're right. You're right. Like, if he's playing with this offense, yeah, he can absolutely be productive. Like, there was times where Jimmy Garoppolo was actually fantasy relevant as the starter of this offense. And
remember Nick Mullins?
Yeah, I know. It's just so like the tough thing is like you go back and like it's hard to not still think of everything you saw on tape from Brock Purdy coming out of Iowa State and being like, that doesn't really translate. And then like he gets into the Shanahan offense and you're like, oh, he can actually sustain drives and keep things going. And I think for me more so any kind of pause that I have is just the fact that I know I'm not going to say a name that's going to be all that scary, but they did go out and get Sam Darnold. They still have Trey Lance, and then the medical stuff, right? Like that's just stuff that still worries me. And we talk to Dr. Vig all the time about this stuff. I don't know anything about it, and that stuff just kind of it weirds me out when it comes to Purdy.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at the 13th player drafted in a relatively, not so deep rookie class here. So I'm going for the pure ceiling. Harmon, if you want to make fun of me, now is your chance, or you can tell us who you took at 202.
I'm not going to make fun of you. I think that the Brock Purdy thing's just tough because like he's probably not going to throw a football for what, like 4 months? I think if he went into this offseason perfectly healthy, I believe what they say that he would probably be the QB1. And that he would start week 1 and he earned that right based on how he played when that massive win streak. Also, by the way, if he hadn't got injured in the NFC Championship game, maybe they go to the Super Bowl, maybe they win the Super Bowl with Brock Purdy. So, obviously there's a lot of confusing and long twisting storylines this offseason. This one I think is the hardest to predict, like what's going to happen with the 49ers quarterback situation. So I'm kind of ready to believe anything. And I do agree with you that I think Brock Purdy showed that he could at least have a Jimmy Garoppolo type of career, like going forward. Right. But I also think he outplayed Jimmy Garoppolo in certain aspects of just pure playing quarterback. So a lot of different ways that the Purdy thing could play out. So I'm not going to make fun of you because I think it's a very volatile situation. You could end up looking really, really good. You could end up looking really, really bad here, Dave. But that's the point, and kind of to lead into my pick here. I don't think there's any more like sure things. There are some receivers that I still kind of like as like potential guys that could make the leap. There's some interesting tight ends for sure. There's also like a lot of running backs here that in 2 months from now we could be talking like, wow, they got completely banged in the NFL draft, and like they might be backups like by the end of the season. There's also like all of these guys I think that could go in the second round here could be like, you know what, they're long-term starters for their teams. A lot of volatility here. I'll kick it off by taking Brian Robinson of the Washington Commanders, who, by the way, I just can't get like Ron Rivera, conservative staff, and like we're going to have new ownership. Let's hit like a home run with our first round pick. Let's just take Bijan Robinson 16th overall. And like, I can't get that out of my head, but let's pretend that doesn't happen. I think Brian Robinson is like an unsexy, but really solid grinder back. I actually think this offense is going to be pretty good, whether it's Jacoby Brissett. I think it's probably going to be Jacoby Brissett, by the way. I agree with you that I think he ends up starting those games. I think he was solid, and I think that Brian Robinson's going to have some decent touchdown equity on this offense. I just think he's a good, solid NFL running back who, like, they just took him in the third round last year, and he had a good rookie season. You'd think they wouldn't get another guy, but, man, this team loves to draft running backs, so we'll see. But that's going to be the theme of this round is these running backs who are standing on very shaky ground but could really go either way.
Yeah, and if they do end up drafting Bijan Robinson, just prayers up to the commissioners who are going to have to reverse how many picks this year when they see B. Robinson, Washington, RB in the second round. No. And I didn't want that Robinson. So let's hope it doesn't happen.
Are they going to have to do the like BR and BI Robinson on the back of the? I mean, it's a multi-layer nightmare, like a multi-layer nightmare here, that whole thing. But I'm putting it out there now because I can't shake the fact that Bijan Robinson is landing in a spot that's just going to like, he's going to be slightly banged. The other current starter is going to be a little messed up as well.
That makes Antonio Gibson essentially useless if that ends up happening. Exactly. Alfredo, onto your pick. Who did you take with 203?
Yeah, to steal the words of Matt here, another running back that just could totally get banged by this draft process. And it's once again, I'm thinking about Bijan Robinson potentially going to this team. I'm talking about Tyler Allgeier, the running back for the Atlanta Falcons, and it seems safe. Like, it seems like if there's a guy that could still be good, like, he kind of falls into some of that same category as Brian Robinson, you know, like a coach that loves to maintain possession of the ball and run the ball and old school football. And the Falcons ran the ball the second most of any team behind only Philly. And Tyler Allgeier was pretty good when he was running. He finished as Pro Football Focus's highest graded rookie running back, and he was solid in like a whole bunch of fun metrics like yards per touch and missed tackles forced and explosive run rate and blah, 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 blah. Basically, he was just really good as a rookie, and I don't think that too many people were expecting it. There were some hardcore Tyler Allgeier truthers, but I don't think it was to this extent that people thought he's going to go over 1,000 yards as a rookie. And his final 4 games were just absolutely nuts in terms of usage. He was getting nearly 20 carries a game and averaging 108 rushing yards. Like, that's stuff that we really haven't seen from too many rookie running backs. And like, those are numbers that you see from like, I don't know, 2003 NFL. Like, that's not very common where you see running backs getting 20 carries, especially if they're not stars. But right now, the Falcons, no real additions at the running back spot. I mentioned, Bijan Robinson. There's a lot of really weird chatter, guys, about Bijan Robinson going at pick 8. That is one of the prospects that the Falcons really, really like. And they have kind of shown this affinity for these super athletic freak players, whether it's Kyle Pitts and Drake London, and taking them early. It would not shock me, but I think it'd be weird if they got him, and that would totally tank Allgeier's value. I'm not super worried about Cordero Patterson. I love the player, but he's 32 years old. They could save $2.5 million in cap by cutting him. So if they go out and they draft, like, let's say a Tyjae Spears or something like that, I still think that Tyler Allgeier ends up with a good workload. He's a talented player in a run-first offense, and as long as it's Desmond Ridder, Taylor Heineke, heck, even if they do make the trade, Dave, that we're talking about for Lamar Jackson, I think that only improves the running offense for that team. So, yeah, I mean, I'm happy with a high-end running back 3, let's call him, in this offense, and getting him in the second round of this draft.
Yeah, I mean, and the way that Arthur Smith likes to ride his running backs, if they don't draft Bijan Robinson this year, it wouldn't shock me one bit if Tyler Allgeier sneaks in as a back-end RB1, because he's going to get a ton of volume on a team that wants to run the ball. So I love Allgeier there, and if you didn't pick him, I was going to take him with my next pick, but somebody had to bite the bullet eventually. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it, but Kenny Pickett slid all the way to 204, and I figured if I already took Brock Purdy, this is the yin to balance out my yang. I went the opposite direction here, taking the guy who was pretty uninspiring as a rookie. We saw some flashes here where it looks like he could be a competent NFL quarterback, but I'm still not completely sure that he's a long-term answer in Pittsburgh, but he's probably going to be there for the next 2 to 3 years at a minimum. It's a very good ecosystem led by Mike Tomlin with a lot of really talented pass catchers. It's a super flex draft. At this point, we're kind of swinging for the fences, and I think that Pickett's upside as a potential starting quarterback is just too enticing to pass up here. I'm not going to spend too much time defending this pick because I'm pretty uninspired by it, but Kenny Pickett, that was my pick. Matt, over to you at 205.
Yeah, and I'm going to default to college quarterback, college evaluation more on this one than what we saw in the NFL. But frankly, I think like the rest of the receivers, you kind of have to do that. There's no like real standout. If they stood out a bunch their rookie year, they're going to go in the first round of this redraft. So at 205, I'm going to go back to Skyy Moore here, a player that I really liked as a prospect, was a big fan of. Obviously, he showed us next to nothing as a rookie, didn't really get on the field. It is wild that the Chiefs seemingly have this screaming wide receiver need, and everybody's talking about it, but they do have a guy they took in the second round last year that like they've never been super hard on publicly or anything, and I think fits into the role that like Juju Smith-Schuster just left as like a slot guy. Thought he was a pretty solid route runner. Obviously, I think that he's talked about they had to rework him a little bit as a collegiate prospect, which makes sense because he was playing at like Western Michigan or whatever, and was playing against a bunch of like future pharmacists and CVS workers and stuff. So I get it. I understand why they had to make him a little more technically sound. Still like Skyy Moore a lot as a player. Again, showed us nothing as a rookie, but could walk into a ton of opportunity here alongside obviously Patrick Mahomes. And I'm going to default back to the collegiate evaluation on him, which I thought he had a pretty solid pro projection.
Yeah, and I think Alfredo has dropped one of the most inspiring stats I've heard about Skyy Moore. He led all rookie wide receivers in Super Bowl touchdown catches, so he's got that going for him. That's pretty much the one data point you could find about Skyy
No
Moore.
more punt returns. Let's get him off. Oh my gosh,
no
more punt returns. Although he had a pretty good return, I think, in the playoffs. But regardless.
And you see this a lot with those guys from smaller schools. I mean, even Corey Davis, it took him kind of a few years to get up to NFL speed. So I'm with you. I think same school. Yeah, and I think it's way too early to write off Skyy Moore. So the upside is there. Love that pick, Matt. Alfredo, over to you at 206.
Yeah, before I get started, did I miss something? Does Western Michigan have a really good pharmacy school or something? Like, was that?
Not that I know of.
Oh, okay.
I thought he was going to say farmers.
I was going to say it's more, I think, respectable than like, I don't know. Yeah. Some other things you could say. So
just went like the mid tier. I liked it. All right. So yeah, here I went with, I kind of, I don't want to say broke the seal on this, but I kind of did. Going Greg Dulcich here, taking a tight end. And I think that so much of this is just tight ends are really annoying in fantasy football. It seems like just volume is never consistent. Most tight ends simply just don't have the athleticism to be a downfield threat. And Greg Dulcich solves a lot of those issues. He had a really nice prospect profile, and he started his career with double-digit fantasy points in 4 of his first 7 games, where he's a tight end 1. You hardly see rookies doing that in terms of fantasy football. And he only had 3 games all season where he didn't finish as a top 16 tight end, let alone like making it a rookie. If I told you that any tight end did that, you'd be like, oh, okay, cool. Seems pretty safe. And so now we're talking about a guy that should only be like continuing to get better. I think we can all agree Sean Payton's a better coach than Nathaniel Hackett, particularly when it comes to offensive play calling, utilizing the tight end. Dave, I know you and Joe Bryant think there could be a Russell Wilson revival in 2023. That'd be cool. But like the thing with him is for Greg Dulcich, right? All these tight ends, kind of like what Matt was touching on with the wide receivers here. You're at this point, you're taking calculated risks with these players. And if I mix with Greg Dulcich, then cool. He's probably a tight end like 10 through 14, right? Something like that. But if I hit, I'm golden because Greg Dulcich becomes potentially a top 4, top 5 kind of tight end. He's got that athletic profile in him, and we saw him produce even when the offense in Denver was not playing all that well.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, he looks spectacular as a rookie. Small sample size, but great hair, great mustache. All that's working for him. I'll go with my pick though, over at 207, and we're getting in the trenches. There's no such thing as a sure thing at this point, and I went with Rachaad White, and there are some glaring issues with his rookie season, but I think the one thing that I can get excited about is that we saw him wrangle away the job from Leonard Fournette. And yeah, sure, it was an injured, old, beaten up Leonard Fournette, but by the end of the season, Rachaad White was getting all of the high value touches, all the passing down work, all the goal line work, and I think he's a lot bigger than people think he is. Matt, you'll get a kick out of this story. Recently, Hutchison Brown over at Footballguys put a story up on YouTube doing a dynasty dissection on Rachaad White. Hours after posting that video, we got a DM from Rachaad White saying, hey, if you guys are going to talk about me, you better get it right. I'm no longer 5'10", 215 pounds. I'm 6'1", 225. Ask anybody who's seen me. I have grown since the NFL Combine. He goes, so if you're going to be talking about me, he goes, I'm 6'1", 225. Make sure that that's what you're using in your content going forward. So, from the
that's good to know.
From eat your vegetables, kids.
Yeah, he has grown, and he said that he is ready for a 3-down role. So the things I could pull up that make him sound good: 58 targets as a rookie is pretty exciting for a running back. He had the second best catch rate among all running backs, which is what we expected from somebody with his pass catching profile. The downside, 3.7 yards per attempt, negative rushing yards over expectation. Those both concern me a little bit, but he's still young, and he's got the chops to be a PPR machine. So even if he isn't a 3-down back, he has shown that he is great as a pass catcher, and he can lean into that throughout the rest of his career. Matt, who did you take at 208?
That Rachaad White story is so good. I have to just come back to that. That is so good. Not just because he engaged with your guys' content, which is pretty cool, but also this is prospect season, And we've talked about Bryce Young's weight a ton, which is fake weight. Nobody cares what he weighed at the combine. That's not what you're never going to play at that. But like these guys are like 21, 20, sometimes 20-year-old dudes. Like, and I mean, you guys know this too. People watching know this. Our bodies have changed a lot as real just humans since we were 21 years old. I'm not 21 years old anymore for sure. So people change, and like it's even like workout metrics. It's so stupid. People are just like, hey, DJ Chark ran a 4.3 at his combine. That was like 5 years ago, 6 years.
5 years and 7 injuries ago.
Yeah, right. He ain't running no 4.3 right now. So right. Yeah, that stuff like the weight and the measurements, it drives me nuts. So that's a great story.
I say this all the time, Matt, because I know you work out, and when you go to the gym, there's some days where you're just crushing, and you're just lifting everything, and you're hardly cracking a sweat, and then there's other days where you like can hardly get through your first set. We've got to think about that at the combine. Some days guys are just running faster than others, so like we put so much emphasis on what somebody does in a 5-second blip of their life when we don't know what they had for dinner or what they had for breakfast or how they're feeling that day. I mean, at the end of the day, every day is a different day when you're in the gym. We put way too much of an emphasis on the combine.
And 100%, like these guys are real athletes, and no disrespect to you, Dave. So I'll just speak for myself. I'm not, So there is a difference there between but it's so true. And just even the weight stuff, like if you work out a ton and you're into like tracking your weight and you're into your fitness and stuff, you might weigh like 220, and then the next day for no reason you'll be like 225 or your weight fluctuates a lot. So what you get to put, like, again, Bryce Young gets to put like 204 or 205 on his sports card and his like Yahoo page, shout out, his NFL.com page, all that stuff, less important, but he gets to be that forever, but he's never going to be that forever. So anyways, that's our talk on weight for the day. What you really came for was me talking up James Cook here, who I took at 208. And I'm not like super bullish on this pick. In fact, there is another back I kind of regretted not taking here. But I do think that James Cook is going to get labeled as like a big fantasy loser coming out of free agency because they signed Dameon Harris. But like they signed Dameon Harris to a 1-year, and I like Dameon Harris, by the way. I'll preface it by saying that. But they signed him to a 1-year deal with money that like never really got announced until like way after the deal. So it's like not that big of a thing. So I don't think James Cook might never be like a true feature back, but there's definitely a scenario where Dameon Harris, a guy who's struggled with injuries, gets hurt at times this year, and then like James Cook might stand alone in that backfield. Again, they could make another move in the NFL draft, but I still think he is like a decent bet here in the middle of the second round. Probably never going to be a star, but maybe a useful player on the Bills and definitely on fantasy teams as well. Even if Josh Allen's never going to be a high throw it to running back type of dude, I think that is obviously the role they have him earmarked for.
I was just digging into some metrics yesterday, and this actually surprised me quite a bit. James Cook led all running backs in breakaway run rate. Rushes over 15 or more yards. He had the highest rate of 15 or more yard rushes of any running back, not just rookies, any running back in the NFL. So, that's kind of what we were hoping, is that he'd have this big play ability, and that translated into the NFL. Alfredo, back to you with 209, and you kind of took a pray and spray approach here.
I haven't heard that, but yeah, I wasn't overly excited about this pick after I did it, and I'll be totally honest, this is still a bit of romanticizing a player for his college profile and like what I saw on tape coming out of college, similar to how Matt was looking at Skyy Moore. But I went with Trey McBride, the tight end for the Arizona Cardinals, and I think that he was the top tight end out of that class going into the draft, right? Everyone agreed like he was the tight end 1, even as much as people loved Greg Dulcich. Then Zach Ertz gets hurt in week 9. McBride finally comes in, starts to play a little bit more. He plays 85% of the snaps. He just wasn't running routes, wasn't getting many targets. Like he just seemed like a guy that was just kind of on the team to be there, right? A lot of that was just the Cardinals were a mess. Like the Cardinals were a mess, and things just kept getting worse. And if you watched, man, I just lost. What's the show that they followed them around all season? Oh my gosh,
Hard
the training
Knocks.
camp. Hard Knocks.
Hard
Thank
Knocks,
you.
yeah.
Yep. And like that was just a nightmare to watch as an audience member, seeing how bad it got for them. But the final 4 weeks, it gave us just like a little bit of a glimmer of hope. And I already talked it up before as to like why I really enjoy the tight end position. But the final 4 weeks, he was top 12 in fantasy points per game. And once again, it's just hard to find that amongst young tight ends. Looks like DeAndre Hopkins is on the way out. Newly named Chosen Anderson, no longer with the team either. New Arizona Cardinals offensive coordinator, has experience as the tight ends coach in Cleveland with Kevin Stefanski, who before that they were in Minnesota, another tight end heavy scheme. So like, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Trey McBride has himself a nice jump from year 1 to year 2. We don't know what the recovery is going to be like with Kyler, but once he gets back, he's probably not as mobile. Whether there's a backup quarterback in there, they're probably going to be looking for that tight end and some easy targets to him and the potential starting wide receivers for this team, Dave. I mean, like, they're lucky if they can get on Splash Mountain at Disney World, man. Marquise Brown and Wan'Dale Moore, like, dude, like, they need to find themselves a big target. And, you know, Trey McBride could be that guy.
I'm with you there. Now, Matt, I just realized we got a late start to today. And do you have a few minutes to go through these last three picks here? I don't want to keep you.
No, you're good. Let's go. Let's do it.
Let's go ahead and dive right in. And a little peek behind the curtain. When we were doing this before the show and we were picking our picks, I listed all of the rookies by draft capital. And I think that's the only reason that I was able to kind of get away with a steal here with Isiah Pacheco at 210. I'm sorry. You know, he looked great as a rookie. And I really think that the only reason that I was able to get him here is because he was buried way down in the Excel spreadsheet that we were drafting from. But he led all of his...
Very unfair. Cheated. You cheated.
It was. I will take it. I mean, realistically, I was surprised when I saw him there. I was like, oh, yeah, I kind of forgot that Isiah Pacheco was a 6th-round pick last year. So I was happy to get him. But I think the biggest sign that the Chiefs really believe in him is that he led the team in touches during the Super Bowl. He locked in the goal line work. He was getting targets in the Super Bowl. He had 5.2 yards per touch last year throughout the regular season, which ranks 16th among running backs. And you hear me talk on this show all the time. Rushing yards over expectation per attempt is one of my favorite metrics when you're trying to judge a running back just from a pure running standpoint. I feel like it correlates very well with my eye test, and it's also shown to correlate well to fantasy production. He had 0.76 yards over expectation per attempt. That was 8th among all running backs last year and the best among all rookies. I think the one thing with Pacheco is you don't even have to be like a film grinder or anything. I was at a Super Bowl party and a girl who doesn't even watch football goes, man, that guy runs like he is mad. And like, you can just see it. Like, this guy is just like bursting with frustration every single time he touches the ball. It's like his livelihood depends on it. I think that's one of the best traits that you can have for a running back. So absolutely thrilled to get Isiah Pacheco here at the 210. Harmon, over to you with the 211.
Yeah, this is another receiver that I liked in a little bit as a prospect. Alec Pierce, you know, coming into the NFL, my notes on him as a prospect in reception perception was he can run go routes, post routes, slant routes, and win contested. That's pretty much about it. My notes on him from the NFL so far in reception perception, he wins on go routes, post routes, slant routes, jump balls. That's about it. So he translated pretty well from what I saw. Now, I don't think he has like superstar potential or anything like that, but he is behind Michael Pittman on a wide open depth chart there in Indianapolis. Obviously, we don't know what their quarterback situation is going to look like, but I think he's kind of flying under the radar a little bit as a guy that I think, again, not a future superstar or anything like that, but a guy that's going to be probably volatile as a player, probably volatile as a fantasy producer, but somebody that I think is going to walk into some decent opportunity here this year. And, you know, the Colts invested a 2nd-round pick in him. They liked him. I think he probably showed them, just like he showed me, a lot of what I was expecting him to be as a prospect coming into the NFL. So I kind of think he's flying a little bit under the radar as a guy that might be a little more fantasy relevant than we think.
Yeah, you know, it's such an overused cliche, but I feel like Alec Pierce is just like the definition of one of those guys that is better in best ball. You're never going to feel comfortable starting him in your lineup on any given week because he could have a 2-target, no-catch game, but he's also got that ability to score from just about anywhere. You know, he can blow the top off a defense. He can wrangle in a contested touchdown. So I like Alec Pierce there. Now, Alfredo, at 206, you took Greg Dulcich. At 209, you took Trey McBride. Tell us who you took at 212.
Listen, David, I don't have a tight end problem. I can stop drafting them whenever I want. I just choose not to. Okay, so to close out this draft, I took Chig, Okonkwo, and I'm just a sucker for like these big, fast, young players at the tight end position. I think everyone always makes this like really just kind of annoying thing where we all say we want the next Travis Kelce. Well, maybe we just stop assuming that there is a next Travis Kelce. Like this is probably the best tight end to ever play the game, right? I'm perfectly fine with finding the next Mark Andrews or Darren Waller, and it's proven that at the tight end position, the way you find those guys is crazy good athletes. Guys who can get open in the middle of the field, create big chunk plays from that position, and Okonkwo is that guy. 6'2", 243, ran a 4.5. I know we just discounted the combine, but I'm going to bring it back and say it matters a lot right here. 4.52 for Okonkwo, and like we saw it though. It's not like something like he had a good track day that day, right? Or like he just happened to be fast that day. No, like he's actually been good on the field. You saw him making explosive plays out there for the Titans in an offense that was really, really bad. And Titans don't have pass catchers once again going into the season. I think you can copy and paste a lot of the things you said about Treylon Burks, right? I mean, you look around, they've got Treylon Burks, Kyle Phillips, Nick Westbrook Akine. Like, I don't know that they're going to go and invest heavily into the wide receiver core or the tight end position. So we should still see some decent target volume on this team. And, you know, even if the offense is limited or they don't have a high passing volume, that's fine, because the way that he was making these catches and the fact that he was a priority in that offense, okay, he was targeted on 33% of his routes. That was third highest amongst all tight ends. So this is a guy that, yeah, we've seen it might be limited, but he's getting good usage. He was a top 15 fantasy tight end in 4 of his final 6 games. And man, the Titans may not look good for the future, but I'm cool taking a nice bet here on Okonkwo.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. My completely unreasonable take is that I spent years touting Jonnu Smith, and I just can't do it again with Chig. I mean, it's as simple as that. Jonnu Smith burned me year after year after year, and I can't do it again with Chig. But agree with you, Alfredo. You have a much more nuanced and data-based approach to this conversation than I did. Anyway, want to thank everybody for tuning in to episode 65 of The Launchpad. Before we sign off here, one more time, Matt, let everyone know where they can find you on social media and where they can find Reception Perception, your show on Yahoo, and all of that.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at MattHarmon_BYB. Appreciate that. ReceptionPerception.com. We have 3 tiers of subscriptions, so I think it's something for everybody, whichever level you want to dive into RP. And there's, you know, like I mentioned, the rookie profiles are coming up soon. A lot of other things coming to the website throughout the summer. A lot of player profiles and a lot of more advanced features as well. So definitely would love it if anybody would go there and subscribe to the site. Yeah, the Yahoo Fantasy Football Forecast is the name of the show for now. And you can subscribe where you ever get your podcasts to that one. That would be great.
Yeah. You know, I've had you on the show a couple times. I've had some shows with Andy Behrens, and neither of you seem too thrilled with the name of the podcast. I know Andy has talked about wanting to change it quite a few times as well.
I'm not sure that anyone likes that name. And now that I'm full-time hosting the show, you know, I'm the everyday host, every episode host. I think it's past time we go ahead and change that to something that isn't the worst thing on planet Earth to say. Yeah, I don't think it is. So, yeah, I love the show. I think it's a good show.
A great show, I'd go as far as to say.
Yeah. Thank you. I think the show has been great since I took it over. Took more of an ownership of it, but I think it's about time we get the name to catch up to the quality of the show.
So Matt Harmon _BYB, check him out there, and you will be able to find out the new Yahoo show, whatever that is called, going into the 2023 season. And then, of course, Alfredo, let everyone know where they can find you on social media and, you know, football guys and all that good stuff.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter at The Pretend GM, and my show, which is just, I think, incredibly named The Pretend GM Fantasy Football Show. But I don't know if the content reaches the level of the name, so there's like an evening out that's happening there. But you can find all my stuff here on footballguys.com and The Pretend GM on anywhere you get podcasts.
And of course, I'm Dave Kluge. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. All of my written and video content can be found right here at Football Guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Thank you for tuning in. As always, be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/footballguys so you can check out all of the other information that we have to offer at Football Guys through our video content. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up, because that's going to help some other people find the video and help us expand our reach a little bit. And if you have anything to add, whether it be positive, negative, or just general feedback, leave it in the replies below, and we will be sure to help you out if you have any questions. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, subscribing, youtube.com/footballguys.